Season 2, Episode 2. We are recording on the 20th of January 2019 for release on the 22nd of January 2019. I'm very sorry for stammering there. I was just caught with the fact that we're coming up on like the last half of January and kind of got myself spooked a bit because I realized that this year is already quietly vanishing into the ether. To share in my horror, maybe, I don't know. It's Mr. Andy Hanley. How you doing, Andy?
Yeah, I'm doing well, but yeah, I have been having the same kind of crisis over the last week or so when I've started, like, things that I talked to people about. It's like, oh yeah, we'll do that in February. And suddenly like, oh god, it's nearly February. I need to actually pull my finger out and do the thing that I promised now.
Yeah, same. In fact, in my case, it's like remembering that the month is quietly vanishing, going to a contractor we're working with and saying, hey, the month is mostly gone. Have you finished yet? Oh, we'll be a bit longer. It's like, you may not want to take that shot. Anyway, yeah, weird trickle-down time dilation nonsense. Good fun for everyone involved. So yeah, this podcast is your fortnightly look at manga. We'll focus on joint discussion. We announce our titles ahead of time, so you can also join in if you so wish. We have a Patreon. I've just put up, a week ago, I put up our 2018 disclosure report, which is just kind of a way of showing you, how the sausage is made, how the cookie crumbles, how the money is spent, frankly. And that kind of tots up all of our expenses and also the income we get from our Patreon subscribers. So thank you to everyone for that. Just kind of show you that, turns out money takes money to make this thing work. But thank you everyone for supporting us. And actually thinking about it, I need to check the votes after this recording to find out what our bonus episode is going to be about, because we probably have another dead heat. If you wish to try and force taste upon us, you too can join up to the Patreon, and from very little money, you can vote on what we're going to record on. So yeah, we had some pretty good stuff in the docket. I can't quite remember what the actual voting layout is like, but we shall find out after this, Andy. So prepare yourself for impending meteor strike.
Indeed, this is like the FA Cup now, where you know that the draw is going to come at the end, and you don't know whether you're going to get a really good draw or a really bad draw. What ball is going to come out of the little velvet sack? Who knows? Man,
if I could afford a velvet sack, things would be very different around here.
yeah. Maybe in next year's transparency report we can report on our progress in buying balls and sacks. Oh god, this all sounds terrible now.
We've got a linen bag full of light novels for some reason. Except we don't read them; we just beat people up with them. Weird. It works like doorknobs.
Probably a more entertaining use of them, but anyway.
Yeah, you don't say. Some of them, at least. Cool. Anyway, so moving on to the main part of the show. Normally we'd have returning champions here, but with the advent of the Shonen Jump app, we were all caught up on Promised Neverland. And which was always going to be the standby of this feature. And also I've been busy with other things, so not much to report on there from either of us. So moving on, we're going to talk about our picks. So first and foremost was mine, if you don't mind, Andy.
No, let's go for it.
Okay, so before I actually say any of this, I need to apologize in advance for how I'm going to absolutely and utterly murder the place names of these different towns in Tokyo, because I'm going to mispronounce it. My accent is already a complete nightmare. But this title is called "Is Kichijoji the Only Place to Live?" ? Volume 1. So this is a manga about a pair of sisters who run a real estate agency they inherited from their parents. They work in and around Kichijoji, which from context appears to be quite a fashionable, well-liked, very pleasant to live in part of Tokyo that's well regarded. Got good transport links, but then it's Tokyo. Good transport links, good vibe, good places, but also kind of changing. To localize it quite a bit, it reminds me vaguely of Mill Road in Cambridge, which until recently was the one cheap part of Cambridge. In fact, it was known as being quite, quote, bohemian as Cambridge can get, even if it is still quite raw-ish. And that place, I lived there for a good long while and bailed on it basically as it was starting to get gentrified to hell. And now it continues to be gentrified. And I went back there a few weeks ago and was horrified. So don't get attached to anything, ever. Basically, this pair of sisters and I forget their names, but they barely say them, so can't blame me. They are rather eclectic. One of them's like a death metal fan or just a general metal fan. The other one's a bit more sort of like relaxed, sociable, but they're good sisters. They hang out, they live together, they take care of the family business and have a merry old time while doing it. And they're quite good at what they do, as it turns out. So basically, the series is about random stories, or like one-shot episodic stories of women who come to the estate agents and basically go, hey, I'd like somewhere around Kichijoji. I'd like this, this, and this. And it turns into kind of like a much more human version of every single bloody property show you ever see on Channel 4. Like property, like location, or whatever. Where it kind of slowly unpeels, people's desires for where they want to live, how their living space fits into the rest of their life, what's going on in the rest of their life, because moving house is quite a big deal and it's a big upheaval and a lot of work, as I can say from someone who's done it enough. And how, Andy, you moved country not too long ago in the grand scheme. And so it investigates that, and it slowly peels apart their motivations, what they're actually looking for, and what they want to see. And then it takes basically in every single chapter, the main characters kidnap the poor hapless idiot in some way, either with like a boot into a car or jumping onto a train, and they go somewhere else and they say, hey, how about this place? This is not Kichijoji, but it does everything you want to and gets you everything you want to in your life. And we're going to go to some shops a la, like a general tourist manga, and we'll eat some food and talk about things. And there's always at one point in the chapter this 2-page spread of just like the character having their personal sort of moment of feeling at home in a place. And then they and then they take an apartment. And that's kind of the cycle. As I say, it's highly episodic. The only real constant are the sisters and their weirdo Isao dude, who is basically human Google, who looks really like, I hope they pay that guy well because he looks really unhealthy.
Yeah, he does not look like he's having a good time in that office.
Well, even his way of shaking his head basically involves going 170 degrees back and forth, like he's some kind of like Weeble toy or something. Worry about him. But yeah, it's got a lot of heart. It's got a lot of human element, unsurprisingly, because it's not just about hard-nosed property buying and selling. It's about, okay, like, why have we come to this, and how is this going to help you in the rest of your life, and where are you going? And it doesn't purport to be like a panacea, but it is a really fun human tale, and it really helps that like the main cast, like they're on the larger side. Like I can't think of a way of putting it, but they are like they like to eat. They have like slightly on the higher side of healthy, but not full on overweight, crazy, like hilarious. Like it's not like sort of they're drawn slightly on the chubbier side for laughs or a joke. The characters themselves are like perfectly comfortable with their bodies, and it's not seen as anything horrible. And they just like to food and putting it away. And so, it all feels very human, like that you see 1 or 2 pages where like one of the characters is like picking their nose and they think no one's looking except you are because you're the reader. And everything's very human as a result. Like it all feels very earnest, and the people are coming to these things earnestly and honestly with different things go on in their life. Stuff happens, normal things like, partners cheat on each other, and oh, what does that mean? And what do we want? And oh, can we go see that gig? And where do you want to eat? And it's all very human and very quite earnest. In fact, it feels more human than most of those property shows you see where they take a pair of middle-class assholes from Nottingham and show them 6 places, and then they go, no, and then they don't get anywhere because goddamn. But yeah, that's my personal hatred of those shows taken care of. But anyway, it's kind of pleasant as a result. It also has quite a nice little afternote after each chapter saying, hey, here are some of the places we went to and some photos, and this is why it's nice. And it's like, oh, okay, weird. Like, I guess, it clearly comes from a place of love and heart, and kind of personal interest, which is, again, another part that makes it feel very human. Sorry, Andy, I've gone off at a mile a minute. What did you think of it? Because I gotta admit, what we actually got out of this was not, I don't know what I was expecting, frankly. I just thought it would be kind of like adventures in, human tales, but then this was actually kind of a lot more human and earnest than I was expecting, and kind of enjoyed it as a result. Sorry.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's a series I'd actually kind of flip-flopped on kind of suggesting for this podcast myself, and I was I never ended up picking it for that exact reason. Like, I still don't know what this is. Like, I've looked at the preview things, I've read the synopsis. I'm still not sure whether this is super something I will like or super something that will just bore the pants off of me. But as it turns out, it ended up charming the pants off of me, which is far more preferable. And yeah, I think you've kind of hit all the notes really that I would have done. Like, yeah, I ended up really enjoying this volume. Like, it is, like you say, it is very human. And it does a lot of things that are just kind of unique that you don't really see that often in other manga. I mean, on the very surface level, I feel like this is the first manga I've read that has characters that are twin sisters that are not fetishized at all, which is just like, low-hanging fruit, but still, like, I feel like any other manga that I've ever read where it's like, oh, they're twin sisters, there's always like a nudge, wink, wink, or some kind of like moe element to it that is clearly not here there. It's just like, hey, they just happen to be non-identical twin sisters. What are you going to do? And the other thing that I kind of find interesting about this series as well is that I feel like so many series that I've read of this kind of ilk that are based around a particular job or a profession are very kind of laser focused on either like having your dream job or kind of like, it's all a very kind of idealized, like, this is a job I love, this is a job that is fantastic. Whereas actually these two characters have kind of fallen into being real estate agents, and they kind of don't particularly like it. Like, they openly admit at one point, like, yeah, we don't really care about this job, but we've inherited it from our parents, so, it's a living and we'll do it. And it's kind of like refreshing to see characters being good at their job without like it being their absolute passion. It's just like they've fallen into it and they're making the best of it and kind of finding ways to do the things that they like kind of around it, like taking their clients out for cream buns and etc. But like there's
watermelon in the office.
Exactly, which is some like really great lot of vignettes like that. But like, I don't know, there's something very refreshing about that that's just kind of a reminder of like, hey, you can have a job that you can be good at and that you can kind of get the most out of without it being the thing that you love and your absolute passion. And I know there was something kind of nice and unique about that I don't think I've seen anywhere else, because it's usually all about like, oh, this is my dream job, it's the one thing I've always wanted to do.
But no, I'm with you. I really agree. Like, especially because like the entire series kind of has a slightly healthy attitude towards work, because most of the people in this are moving for work or a change in circumstances, and so it holds that all in a very human way of like, hey, sometimes you want to work, sometimes you've got to work, sometimes, and it kind of holds that all in. Like, one person who they show around who is probably the most sort of reticent, like, spent most of their time working but then caring for their parent, and they're now quote unquote free, and now they're like, well, I guess I'll move. So it's really fascinating in that regard. And also, like you say, like, the sisters themselves have very different passions, and they've fallen into this like quote unquote family business. But I don't know. I think the fact is that even though they're not, it's kind of the one twin blessing where they're good at what they do, at least in the parts we see. And equally, that's kind of where like Isao, their weird like dog's body, comes in, the weird puppy man thing. Like, he's also really good at his job, although his job seems to be like using the computer like a maniac. Sorry, I can't get over that dude. It's real funny. But it's got a lot of heart in it, as you say, like, where it's, it's all, also like, the one thing that's also really helps is it's not slavishly overdrawn, if that makes sense. Like, it conveys like a definite sense of place and differences between locations, and it obviously has like photorealistic, well, not photorealistic, but photo accurate but not overly done photorealistic backdrops. So the backdrops are not, it's not like it says we're in X and then you get like a picture of X just, changed into cross hatching. It's, it's an approximation. It's a nice view. One of the places I go is Nakano, which was really nice because I've been there and it was pretty boss. Just talking about Nakano and Nakano Broadway. That was great, but it was kind of nice. Just as a sort of whole life sort of thing. As I say, I was, the first chapter felt like it was taking the longest, and I was kind of falling off the wagon, admittedly, because it was taking a while to get going. And I thought, well, either this is going to morph at the end of this chapter and it's going to engage some other sort of storyline or method, or it's going to find a way to better pace it, because the first chapter is kind of intolerably long. But then after that, you get the constant cycle of, customer comes upon estate agent, gag ensues. They then bundle them up and kidnap the person to take them outside of Kichijoji. Then something food, something discussion, 2-page spread where the person has a realization, and then happy ending. So it kind of follows that cycle, but it's kind of a nice cycle because it bloody well works. And in all that, they can tell you a lot and also show a lot about the main sisters.
Yeah. And I do really enjoy, I think the thing that really kept me going kind of through that cycle each time was that I really liked the window into other people's lives that each chapter offered, because it wasn't like crazy melodrama. Like a lot of the subject matter that kind of crops up in there could have turned into sort of a crazy sort of drama that runs alongside it. Like you say, there's somebody whose, parents who they were caring for has passed away. There's, kind of extramarital affairs. There's kind of workplace bullying stuff. Like there are a lot of kind of potentially pretty kind of deep and kind of melodramatic subjects, but they're all kind of treated with a kind of with exactly the touch that they should have for somebody that's looking to move house, of just it comes up in conversation of just yeah, this is the stuff that went down, this is the whole thing, it kind of sucked, but all of these are characters that have kind of got beyond the point of kind of being upset by that, and it's just it's a regrettable thing that's happened in their life that they're looking to move on from. And it's just kind of, it's sort of a refreshing window into that's not it doesn't mire you in the midst of all that and kind of feel the need to dig into it in detail. It's just yeah, here's a thing that happens in some people's, perhaps most people's lives at some point, and here is a person that has kind of moved beyond that and they're now looking for kind of a fresh start or whatever. And that was kind of I feel like that almost played into those 2-page spreads that you mentioned. Those all felt incredibly satisfying to me, to kind of see that at the end of the arc and to kind of see this big kind of vista and the person just kind of finding a place that feels good for them, and just seeing them in the midst of that and just yep, great. That's a really satisfying end to that arc, because, you've seen, their situation has kind of been explained. You've seen them kind of go through trying to figure out what they want to do next, and they found that thing, and they've seemingly, they've kind of ended up in a better place. That feels really good. I kind of came out of this manga with a spring in my step, because it's yeah, I've seen a bunch of people just kind of, move on to something better, not in some kind of massive life changing way, but it's just yeah, I live in a nice place now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. It's really helpful, and like you say, a lot of the people are kind of working out all the other stuff. Finding the house isn't they suddenly become a princess. It's just hey, this solves a lot. It solves problems. But yeah, it's really nice. And as you say, the little realization, it's much like real life when when you come to or leave a place, you can sometimes blink a little too hard, and then you open your eyes, and it feels all new. It's oh, where am I? Oh, I'm on the same place. It's sometimes you can drive down the exact same road, but then sometimes you drive up the other direction and oh, this is completely different. It's got that sort of feeling about it, which is nice. But yeah, it's a good read. It doesn't have an anime, but there is a live action adaptation apparently, and I feel that'd be really hilarious if they have decent characters cast, or decent actresses cast as the main pair of sisters. And mostly because I'd like to see them just sort of chowing down or doing dumb shit in their office. Which feels like it'd be real funny to watch.
I'd also like to see kind of the real life versions of the places they go to here, because I did really get a kick out of all the kind of little highlight pages at the end, kind of including addresses and phone numbers of just yeah, here's this weird little bar, or here's this cool little bookshop, and again, just really nice little bits of flavour just to kind of finish things up.
Yeah, it has the whole to hark back to a series we already talked about. It's got the Wakako Zake feeling of legitimacy, if that makes sense. Wakako Zake, the author went and ate all that stuff. In this place, you can tell the authors have not just been through, but have delved into the places they are talking about. Hell, there's even one page about Urka Taiyaki place where they had to censor what the secret ingredient was.
Yeah.
Because it's why have they censored this? And then they say, oh yeah, we got asked to by the actual shop owner because she was nice to us. So it's okay, fair. That was good fun. But yeah, it's kind of nice, wholesome food. I feel like I'd really like an anime adaptation of this, on the short end, 8 to 12 minutes maybe, probably on the shorter side. I might try and find the live action if it's available somewhere, just to kind of see what it's like.
Yeah, again, kind of much like the Wakakizake anime, like it very much fits into that. You just want kind of one chapter a week, just like one little story, and that would be nice. Like that's the thing. It's a really kind of pleasant series to immerse yourself in just for a little bit of time. But maybe not something that you'd want to kind of go in like whole cloth and marathon.
Yeah, even reading like the volume in 2 sittings was a bit much, honestly. Like that was probably what turned me off initially, was like the first chapter being quite long in my mind, and then I was like, oh, please get on with it. And then I put it down for a bit, came back, and I'm like, okay, no, I'm in a better place for this. Like I can, eating this in one chapter chunks is way more interesting. But yeah. I'll probably continue this at some point once I've got the rest of my backlog taken care of. Haha. But I really enjoyed this. It's currently 6 volumes long in Japan. 5 are released in English by Kodansha. It's available from all good digital bookstores. I think it's digital first at the moment, so maybe a physical release pending. It certainly seems niche enough to like warrant being digital, frankly, because the pitch. While you can easily say, pair of sisters try and help someone find a house, it's like way more actually, like there's way more to it than that, which is pleasant because it's a meat on these bones, much like the characters. Oh no, sorry, probably shouldn't say that. Oh dear, but no, it's good for. I don't know. It's also I just like the human touches of it. Like there's one part where like they're sat on the sofa just lounging around, and one of them's on Facebook on their laptop, and her cleavage is just just resting on the actual front of the laptop itself. And I just found that really funny because it's just like, oh yeah, no, that totally happens with people.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with a lot of that stuff is it's just kind of the 2 sisters are very chill, and kind of just watching their downtime is a lot of fun in its own right. Like sometimes it's deliberately used for humor, but sometimes also it's just like, yeah, that's kind of what people are like when they've just like finished the day at work and they're just kind of flaked out on the sofa, or we're just hanging out with some friends or whatever. It's like it all, again, it is that kind of humanity of just everything feels, and I guess this is kind of the core of what makes the series work. Everything in terms of like the actual characters is really well observed. Like this is clearly an author who is good at looking at people and kind of people watching and sort of understanding, human nature effectively.
Yeah, just the simple things like, conversations and such. It really, you can also see like there's one part where this lady is running a fever and she's having to talk to a subordinate and they're very clearly just talking at absolute cross purposes. So the conversation really doesn't match up whatsoever. And you're reading it going, this is actually like really awkward to read, because you're reading it going, like the secondhand embarrassment is really strong in it, just because it's a really taut, awful, like bad like a conversation that's not going to have a winner in it, and it's just real rough. And yeah, it really works on that end, because it understands that people are messy, I suppose, really is the kind of the long and short of it.
Yeah, especially when they're eating watermelon.
Yeah, that was great. That was a great panel. Oh dear. But yeah, I'm pleased I picked this. It's wild because it totally lives up to the actual like back of the box quote, but it's so much more. So nice.
Yeah, likewise. I can totally see myself reading more of that. Like, I think, especially if I'm in the right frame of mind for it, it's very much just like a really nice, kind of soothing, gentle, easygoing read.
Yeah, not to stick another fork in it, but like it has way more like resolution than friggin' location ever did. They never pick a property. Anyway, whatever. Right, so that's me and my particular sort of nonsense out of the day with. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about this one, Andy. So please take it away.
Yeah, I'm interested in what I have to say about it as well, because there's.
Well, it's a good thing to be talking about it then, isn't it?
there's much to discuss. So my pick for this podcast is ACCA 13 Territory Inspection Department, to use its full name. It's a 6-volume series that is out in its entirety from Yen Press. It got an anime adaptation, I was going to say last year, but it's out 2 years ago in 2017, which a lot of people implored me that I should watch it, and that I should have watched it, and that I was probably a bad person for not watching it, because it was something that it seemed like I would have been into. So
I thought you had watched it. I got confused. I thought you had.
Yeah, no, like I watched the first episode and was like, that could be interesting, and then kind of never actually went back to it. So actually, a chance to read the source material kind of made a lot of sense for me. But it's a series from Natsume Ono of House of Five Leaves and Restaurant Paradiso fame, and it is basically a series that's set in kind of a faux European country, or mostly in the capital of it, Badon, which is the capital of the Kingdom of Doha. And it's basically a country that's kind of split into 13 districts. It's a country that's seen a bunch of war kind of in its relatively recent history, kind of like a century or so ago. And clearly there's been a lot of issues around these sort of disparate districts and kind of territories where they all have very different kind of needs and requirements, and kind of nobody's ever really managed to stitch them together until this kind of current era that we sort of see the series in, where everything's sort of stitched together so that effectively you have this kingdom, but each district sort of has its own kind of independence to a certain extent, or at least kind of the veneer of independence, because everything is ultimately centrally linked. And kind of one of the pivotal parts of the country is this organization, the titular organization of the series, called ACCA, which is effectively kind of all of the public services segments of this sort of government kind of rolled into one. So you've kind of got your police, your fire department, your ambulance, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And more specifically, the series follows the inspection department, who are effectively the auditors for ACCA. They kind of do all the sort of data analysis effectively of what these districts are doing with their kind of their segment of the organization, to kind of make sure that everything is running as it should, that there's no kind of corruption or, nefarious stuff going on. And the main character is, I don't know whether it's Jean or Jean, but I'm going to go with Jean because I assume that's in keeping with the sort of faux European feel. And he's the vice chairman for the inspection department of District 13, which is kind of the capital city. And he's kind of an enigmatic character. Like, he smokes in a country where smoking is kind of seen as very much kind of a hobby of the wealthy, because cigarettes are incredibly expensive. He lives in a very expensive kind of apartment block, which is actually kind of the one part of his personality that sort of reveals to the reader as being not quite what it seems. A lot of the other stuff is still kind of up in the air in this first volume. And weirdly, like in the first chapter of this, one of the first things that gets set up is that this department's about to be closed. And you kind of assume that this is going to be the overarching story for at least the first volume, if not the entire run of the series. But by the end of chapter 1, that's all been resolved. It's not going to be closed anymore. Everything's fine again, because there's been a kind of political U-turn from, we don't need this department anymore. We're going to close it down and kind of, we don't need all this oversight and inspection. It's very expensive. And suddenly somebody's decided that they do again, and everything's called off. Everything's back to normal. And so kind of things then carry on, but there's clearly still some stuff going on kind of in the background of the politics of the nation. There are kind of whispers around a potential coup. The inspection department are suddenly kind of tasked with basically like auditing everything in very short order. So like there's clearly some stuff going on. And that's kind of like the big picture stuff that I feel like this series sets up really well. Like I like the big picture in terms of the world building, in terms of kind of the politics and kind of all the internal stuff. And I'll kind of, I guess we can talk about that a bit more later, because there's also some other kind of far less well drawn stuff in here in the broadest sense. So there's kind of something of an antagonist in this volume, who is basically, to start with, it all makes sense. Like, he's a character who's a bit of a sort of hothead upstart policeman, effectively. He's clearly got a big chip on his shoulder around Jean in particular. Like, he's seen him around, he's seen him like smoking and kind of being aloof as the characters want to be. And he's clearly kind of got a bit of a thing, a bit of a hang up about him, that like he's either kind of, or inherited or talked his way into kind of a position that he doesn't deserve, whereas this young man is kind of like having to work his way up from the bottom effectively, and is probably never going to kind of reach the heights that Jean has. And to start with, that all makes sense. It's like, his motivations, his resentment, it all kind of adds up. But that character has a real weird arc, because he kind of goes from being kind of young, upstart, but very talented kind of officer who, has arrested a lot of kind of prominent criminals and has been doing some really good work in his job. And then the next minute, and there's some more spoilers here, so kind of apologies, but like the next minute then it turns out that like there's some corruption stuff going on with him, but then he kind of gets let off that with just kind of a bit of a ticking off. And then the next thing, he's like catching a criminal, but then letting them go because like the paperwork's too much hassle. And then the next thing you know, he's basically planning to frame Jean for a series of ongoing crimes that he has nothing to do with. And like that character's arc just makes zero sense. It's like, it's almost literally schizophrenic. It's all over the page in terms of kind of the actual character writing, because there's no real handle on what that character is. And it's kind of a shame, because that is kind of the overbearing part of a lot of this first volume of what looks like it's going to be an interesting kind of rivalry on a fundamental level. And it kind of just ends up being a real mess. And I don't quite understand what the thinking was behind any of the writing of that particular character.
Yeah, that character is like the character has several sort of different elements for me, where like the reaction that the character always has in every single like interaction is always like going cheer and like biting their thumbnail in anger sort of thing. But that's their reaction to every single interaction or discussion about Jean. And it gets weird because no matter what happens, he comes to the same sort of like reaction, and that just makes his character seem inconsistent as a result, because no matter what, he's always just fiending to pick a fight and makes big hay about him smoking and nicks his lighter at one point and is going to use that in said arson. And like it just adds way too much stuff onto his character, and he pops up way too frequently in this first volume. And like thank goodness it's resolved by like towards the end of the volume, because I was getting really sick of this person turning up. But also every time he turned up, another plot element got tacked onto them. It was getting really exhausting, where it's like, okay, he doesn't like Jean, that's fine. He has a chip on his shoulder because of this, that's fine. Oh, he applied as well to work where Jean does, that's weird. Okay, and it's like stop. And you know, oh, he's got ties to and he's doing this, and oh, he's actually, you know, corrupt, and it's like stop adding stuff to this one person. Like you don't need to. Every time they appear on screen, you don't need to suddenly like revamp the character again and add a whole thing. Like it made it really tiresome, where it just feels like this one character was the like landing spot for all the elements the author wanted to put in there. And it was all kind of unwelcome, because like I didn't realize it until you actually like mentioned it, and has now opened this wellspring in me, Andy. So your fault. But it's like, wow, like it feels really lame that this one character ends up becoming like just constantly pops up. And also ostensibly that character is not the main thrust of what is happening in any of these chapters. They just keep turning up, and it's like, ugh. Yeah, because all the more interesting stuff is elsewhere, and yet they just keep popping up. And then Jean eventually has to go, hey lad, knock it off. And then it does happen, and then it gets knocked off. So yeah,
it's very weird, because it kind of feels like the author kind of wrote a bunch notes for a bunch of characters that were going to have like single chapter appearances, but then forgot to put paragraph breaks in his notes or something, so they all just merged into one character, like after I don't know a heavy night of drinking or something. Because it feels like all of the kind of the bullet points that are hit there like are fine. They would all work well as kind of like slightly different characters or slightly different situations that Jean has to deal with. Because it's like in the first chapter, you know, you kind of, I think it's the first chapter, you kind of see him like figure out some corruption that's going on somewhere, and like it's pretty low key in terms of like, you know, crime procedural or whatever. Like it's basically like he looks at a log in a database like, hey, somebody changed this, and then kind of goes to the local place like, oh yeah, I can see why, because there's some smuggling shit going on here, and that's kind of it. But like that kind of served its purpose as a just like, oh hey, this is what this department does, this is why it's important. As it turns out, that's also kind of like a pivotal point in kind of saving the department from closure. And it felt like all the other kind of bullet points that were tacked onto this single character could have been kind of extensions of that, of just like, hey, here's the day-to-day job that's going on. You know, there's some corruption, there's some weird stuff happening here that, you know, maybe is showing up in this kind of like analysis going on to say like, oh, hey, you know, there's something nefarious or not quite right going on here. But instead, because it's all just tagged to this one character, it's just like, this dude is real busy and has a different personality every 2 pages.
Yeah, and yeah, as you say, just keeps escalating, and eventually it's like, yeah, it makes it seem weird, because several times I was thinking, wait, is it just a different character and I'm having manga face blindness or something? But also, like you say, the first chapter, like setting up what ACCA does, it kind of has something that I've identified as pet hate of anime and manga, and I don't know where this lies in like translation or original author, so I'm not going to try and lay blame. It would be foolish of me to do so, but they constantly make reference to the inspection department looking at data, and that's it. That's the only word you get is data. It reminds me of so many anime where they're like, "Oh, have we collected the data?" And I'm like, "What do you mean by data? Like, what is that data? Like, my computer's full of data, but what is the data?" And eventually I just started like internally pasting the word records instead. So it's like, oh, police records. They're inspecting police records. Okay, that makes sense because it doesn't explain kind of, it says at the start that ACCA is like civil service, but you're like, well, what do they do? And, but you see the inspection department, but you don't see who they're inspecting for a while. So it's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So that really I felt really adrift for a good long while. I was like, what are they doing? And even then, it still has some rather like, I like this series. I enjoyed it, but I feel like I'm dumping on it a lot, but mostly because it's good, but there are a lot of things to pick apart in it, like really bland, bald-faced exposition, including the phrase, as you both already know. And it's like, no, don't do that on page 10.
That was my favorite part of kind of dumb exposition in this series was like chapter 1, where like the chairman calls like the vice chairman, John, and like another prominent kind of member of that team into his office, says, so what is it you do? And it's like, you know damn well what he does. Like you're his line manager. You're his direct superior. You know exactly what these people do, but you're having to ask them to exposit exactly what it is they do, which is really weird because like a few chapters later, there's a point where you see a group of school kids being kind of taken around like the head office, and it's like,
you get the tour guide exposition done.
Yeah, but
I kind of like that still.
But yeah, that's the thing. Like, I kind of felt that could have been a chapter 1 thing of like John walks into his place of work, and he just happens to walk past like the tour guide, giving the whole like, well, this is what this department does, and oh look, it is the vice chairman. Did you know his name's whatever, and here's what he does? Like, they actually had the perfect setup to do that, but they injected it like 3 or 4 chapters too late, and so we had a lot of far more stupid exposition instead, where a boss asks his subordinates, what do you do?
Yeah.
So that stuff is always frustrating, and like it's fine, like it gets the job done, but it's like, boy, you've written this in the laziest way possible.
Well, it also feels overwritten, like as we mentioned with the character who I wrote their name down. It's long down. It's far down this. Yeah, the rookie. What's their name? God damn it! No.
Yeah, I didn't write that guy's name.
Yeah, I the only characters I really made a note of were Jean, Mauve, the like head of the normal police, the normal ACCA sort of segment of District 13, who is like intensely hot lady, kind of the one person who actually makes Jean like lose their cool slightly at a bakery. Which was pretty fun. I hope she's in the show, in the series more, because she's real cool. But yeah, also at the same time, it just feels like the series is overwritten, because I could, after getting through the first 60-page chapter and finally getting a handle on what ACCA is doing and how Gene operates, which itself, he's like a very cool customer. He's very aloof, very enigmatic on purpose. He doesn't really trust anyone, which is part of his job because it prevents him from getting caught up in the day-to-day, and it allows him to maintain healthy distance from everything else. Meanwhile, all his workmates eat lots of cake and talk about office cake and such and souvenirs, and that's fine. Like, that's what offices are for. It's for doing data analysis and eating cake, I think. But also, like, there's just too many plot points. Like, as you mentioned, there's the like irascible like subordinate, there's the arson going on, there's the possible cancellation and the chief officers that's then undone. I feel like the first chapter could have done without the threat of being closed, almost, because it would have made the setup a lot easier to get going with if it had just been like a normal audit out in the sticks, which was the main thrust of it. And also there's like rumors of a coup, which that's not really a spoiler, it's mentioned in chapter 1. And I'm sorry for the spoiler, but basically, I'm not going to mention specifics, but at the end of the chapter, at the end of the volume, basically Jean is implicated kind of from my point of view out of nowhere as being part of this coup. And it's like, oh yeah, Jean's involved. And here's a last page of the volume shocker. And it's like, why do you... And then it, it compounds the storyline again. And it's like, I don't need this storyline about a coup. I don't need undercover surveillance. I don't need all this. Like, there's far too many elements here when I was quite happy just having, rumors of a coup, Jean playing it cool and trying to get through life without getting stabbed by jealous subordinates, something. There's clearly going to be some corruption in this hierarchy and this bureaucracy because that's what they're there for, basically. And I really liked it when I was reading it, and I came away from the volume feeling quite positive, but at the same time, it's like, man, all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I am on board with the whole kind of coup plot line, like in the grand scheme of things. I'm interested to see where it goes, and I think it actually like plays into one of the strengths of this volume is that a lot of series that have kind of your enigmatic lead character, they feel like they need to have them be enigmatic, but also like tell the reader it's like, well, actually, this is what they're really like. Whereas ACCA actually, for the most part, keeps its powder dry. Like, apart from the fact that around his kind of where he lives and saying like, oh yeah, like he doesn't actually live in this like incredibly sort of well-off tower block. He's basically like the apartment block manager because he's inherited it. But a lot of the other stuff around him is kept very, very dry. Like, we don't really know a lot about him, which actually kind of made that final page reveal kind of interesting to me, because it's like, well, actually, he could be, because, like, we don't really know exactly what the deal is with him, like, getting all these cigarettes. Like, he does keep himself at arm's length from everybody. He's hanging out with some other people who he's seemingly kind of, like, uses them almost as informants, and it's like he does clearly have a network of people that he could bend to his will, and it's like it's totally believable that he could be a part of it. I'm sure it'll turn out that he won't, because that tends to be how these stories go, but like I kind of like that there's so little that you know about him as a person beyond the kind of the broadest things that you see within that first volume, that it's like, well, actually he could be involved in that, and maybe there's a good reason for it. Maybe he is part of it, and like there's some greater good going on. Like I did actually really like that, and I feel like that played well into what they do with that character.
Yeah, I mean there are several not hints, but just things mentioned by characters saying, "Hey, there is more to this character," and we don't quite like the main thrust of it is his carefree, lackadaisical self a facade, or is it real, or is there more to this? Like, is there a third option we can't even hypothesize? I mean, it's already been shown that he's kind of like both more simplistic and more complex than initially expected. And the one thing that kind of makes him down to earth is the fact his sister doesn't really care, so because he lives with his sister in the superintendent's office. But yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, I feel like Jean is a good protagonist and a good character to follow, simply because like he clearly like there is clearly rule bending going on. He clearly has a certain amount of leeway in like both enforcing but also adjusting the laws as he sees. And the one thing that kind of works for me in that regard strongly and most to the point is that you could very easily write a story where he is actually the villain. Like, he is the master manipulator who is like doing all this nefarious stuff, and like if anything it's a sign of rot in the system because he is able to basically just get the job done, but he's a loose cannon, yada yada speech here. So you could totally write him as an actual villain, as being like the person who supposedly does the job but is equally just so off with the fairies about it. Buying all that frigging bread, come on, what's up with that?
yeah, which another thing that antagonist gets incredibly annoyed about. It's like, you're buying bread from here, how dare you?
Yeah.
Which amused me. But yeah, I mean, the other thing that I do really like is I do really like kind of the world and the sort of the organization and the workplace within this series. Like, it feels like a very kind of living, breathing thing. Like, there's a bunch of kind of Chinese whispers going around, be it coups or whatever, that where, clearly people get wind that's like, there's something going on in that department, and kind of, it blows up and escalates as people spread the rumors, and more often than not there's some truth to the rumors, but it's not exactly what's going on when you drill down into it. And there's a whole bunch of kind of politics between departments and weird rivalries, and there's people kind of having their downtime, having their cake time, and trying to again, almost in a weird kind of link back to, is Kichijoji the only place to live? It's just like making the best of your working situation and like finding ways to make it enjoyable, but still getting your work done at the end of the day. And I don't know, there's a lot that I really liked about kind of the broad kind of workplace and the kind of workplace ethic that the series kind of manages to inject in, because it all felt very believable, and it all felt kind of very, very real in its own way.
Yeah, totally. The characters all feel grounded, and they're kind of getting on with life, and you see daily life from a few different angles. I'd like to see some more, perhaps, but you get kind of the machine keeps turning, and the people get out of the way of it, so they don't get ground into paste. And sometimes it helps their lives. Weird. So yeah, the one other thing is like the sense of places you mentioned is really nice. It reminds me vaguely of like Germanic or Austrian sort of extraction, just due to the size of the buildings and some of the architectural uses, which was quite pleasant, because I kind of like that whole school of, these buildings are tall, mostly because I got sick of Cambridge and it being very short, which was dumb. But yeah, also like the art is really good. Natsume Ono is like kind of already known for being good. There's a lot of things I really like about it. There isn't a preponderance of use of screen tone. There is a lot of very interesting like economy, but also good use of line. Like characters' eyes are very fascinating, and the one thing about it as well is that backdrops are not drawn to over much. Like my new fetish is talking about backgrounds being drawn appropriately, but equally like it knows how to use line and curve and space to evoke both the mood and the atmosphere and the general tenor of a place. Like, there's one part where they're at a festival, and so there's like spaced out colors with white in between the color blocks, and also lines there's never a straight line. Everything's curved, everything's massaged, everything's relaxed and almost like water drops. And like there's one part where you see an underground of a metro station. It's all very straight lines, business-like block colors, straight, very straightforward. This is business-like, this is what is happening. Like, you get characters' hair moving in different manners as they're reacting, like it's almost like another like point of reaction for them. So I really like the art, like it, and John especially, like, says a lot with his face, even if he like could be like completely just masking the whole thing. So it kind of works in that regard. Whoever has to do the beta or the black tone for the suit must really hate their uniforms. That's another thing. The uniforms are highly sort of Prussian / militaristic, which makes sense given the history of the ACCA sort of organization and the historical sort of politics of the nation.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the art style, I think that the first chapter in particular is a really good example of that, because he kind of goes out from this capital city into one of the more sort of, one of the more remote and sort of farming-led districts, and you kind of get a really good sense of kind of like you've got this big, spacious, open kind of farming district that is mostly all fields and kind of, smallish buildings, and then you kind of go to and from the capital, which is, a lot busier and, in terms of the skyline and kind of, what's going on the ground, and it kind of gives you a good comparison point in terms of that stuff. I mean, look at it as a whole, like I've never been particularly big on Natsume Ono's art. Like it's one of those things I think I appreciate more than I outright like, but it's effective. I will certainly give it that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it. Like I didn't love it when I put it in museum, love it, but I just kind of enjoyed the fact that it was able to evoke a mood quite easily. Like the sheer breadth of the art. At the same time, like some of the eyes get real freaky and kind of freak me out a bit because I'm a big baby. But yeah, I'm really interested. Even though I've just talked a load of Yang and like I must admit, by the time I put the volume down, all the stuff with the idiot uppity subordinate kind of had left my mind, and I'm curious to read more. The one thing is the anime series, which again I didn't watch either, apparently adapts the entire dang thing. So if we don't have time to buy and read all the manga, we can just watch the anime, I suppose.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I was left wanting to read more of it. That's for sure. I think it's one of those series where, because it is exceedingly good at the stuff it does well, like it makes you want to kind of nitpick and complain about the stuff it does less well all the more, because you can kind of see like the bright sparks and kind of the bright points in the series that are just like, this is the stuff that I really want to see more of. So anything that detracts from that just gets all the more kind of irritating, because it feels like it's missing its own potential in a sense, because it's kind of diverging in ways that are actually kind of doing away from the stuff that is the most interesting part of it.
Totally, so, yeah. It feels like you're having a time stolen. It's like, wait, no, like you're stealing away the good part and giving me bad. What is this? Oh dear.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of hoping it's probably got some of the worst of that out of the way, and I think I'll definitely read like another volume or two to kind of get to the halfway point and see where it's at that stage. Because yeah, like it definitely does a lot of things that are up my alley, and it's definitely kind of got me interested in its kind of big picture storytelling to the point where I do want to see where it's going to go and what the deal is with Jean. So yeah, I think I will certainly read more of it.
Yeah, totally. Plus, it's one thing that I quite enjoy is that it's 6 volumes and it's finished. So it's not like I'm sat here looking at the barrel end of 18 volumes plus and going, oh,
yeah.
That's my new thing to get worried about is if a series is too long, and I look at it and go, I don't think you can sustain this.
yeah, that was actually like something I didn't realize when I picked it, and I was quite happy when I kind of dug into it and realized that that's how long it was. It's like, I might actually like be able to carry this through and finish it, which, a lot of the things that we read, I often end up just kind of leaving it by the wayside because it's like, so it's either a lot of volumes or it's still ongoing, and it's like, how long am I going to be on the hook for this for? It's nice to know that something has an ending and that it's not crazy long.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, I mean, if Natsume Ono can stop overloading some of the characters and plot points, then I can see it totally wrapping that up, no problem. Like I say, the coup d'etat thing's really interesting, but linking it to the department closing down and John and too much. Don't worry about it. Like, you were doing fine, Natsume Ono. You had the correct level, and then you just kept adding stuff. Like, you don't need to. You don't need to eat everything from the buffet on your first go around. Okay, you can come back. Final note. Also, I laughed out loud like a moron in the Sainsbury's cafe when I realised that the little symbol of the bird they have, which looks like Twitter, basically, that's the shape of the actual country. And I laughed my damn head off because I realised that it was actually like a map. And I'm like, what? You made the Twitter bird into a country? So
yeah, I'm pretty sure Twitter's terms of service explicitly say that you can't do that. So maybe let's hope there's not a lawsuit incoming to Natsume Ono for that.
Yeah, the brand guidelines do not allow it to be made into a fictional country in any way. Plus, like, they put the capital city on this tiny leaf in its mouth in the very top, like, northeast, and that just seems like a bad idea. Like, I know you had to put it somewhere away from the seat of supposed power, but don't put your capital off in the middle of bloody nowhere. What are you doing? Like, that's a really easy target for terrorism.
I feel like there's probably some interesting origin story there of how somebody decided to just like reshape the coastline of their country. Like, let's make it look like a bird. It's like, why would we do that? That's going to cost like billions of whatever currency we have. No,
too late. I already pressed the terraforming device.
Yeah, it's like, no, it has to look like a bird. It has to look like my favorite social media icon.
Well, I love as well, like, it's like, oh yes, it's the bird of peace, the ACCA, which also coincidentally died when we formed the country. It's like, what is this? This is a weird thing. There's too much symbology wrapped up in this fucking bird. Oh dear. Anyway, and conservation. Anyway, but yeah, sorry, I took over again. But no, ACCA, it was good fun.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would definitely, if you're interested in kind of some of the stuff we've talked about, it's worth giving a shot, I would say.
Yeah, plus like the first chapter, if you can read the first chapter like on a preview, that kind of like sets you up and gives you the interesting bit. As I say, the one part that kind of got me for the first section was just, what the hell do you mean by data? Stop it! Like, what is this?
Yeah, I kind of took that in the way that I take people about hacking in movies. It's just like, oh, you're just going to do that. I don't really understand how this works, kind of thing.
I think you're right in that Natsume Ono herself didn't quite know what they were doing until it firmed up. So anyway, but yeah, so that's our two series for that's our two series for this week. And I just realized I hadn't actually thought of something for next episode, and I noticed Andy has actually stolen my choice out from under me while I was furiously trying to think of one. Damn it.
Great minds think alike.
Okay, we need a quick break here while I figure out what I'm going to recommend for next episode. I'm not normally this disorganized, I swear to God. Okay, so on to, now I've actually found something. We're going to talk about what we're going to be talking about next time. announcing it. So I have chosen, as of 5 seconds ago, Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, which was recently adapted into an anime by Kyoto Animation. And I already knew about the manga from it, and already was a fan of the manga, and then really liked the anime, and then thought, well, I'll go back to the manga. And now we both can together. Hooray. And Andy, what have you chosen?
So given that it's kind of one of the more talked about shows from the currently airing season of anime, I wanted to dig into the source material for Kaguya-sama Love is War. So I picked up volume 1 of that romantic, in inverted commas, comedy.
Yeah, whenever I see previews of that, I think this seems like some kind of wild thing. I don't know. Just the premise alone is enough to make you scratch your head and go, I guess. So sounds like a good one.
Yeah. I'm also fascinated because there's a really interesting visual treatment that the anime adaptation has, and I'm kind of curious to see like how much of that is born from the manga or how much of it is cut from whole cloth. So we shall see.
By interesting visual treatment, you don't mean like handshakers / whiz, do you?
God, no, thankfully.
The Gohan's effect.
Lots of VCR scanline effects, though. Somebody's clearly found that filter in.
Someone found video games from 2017 then.
Yeah, basically.
Ugh, yeah. It was a great effect, and then everyone used it, and I got sick of it within 4 seconds. Oh, dear. Also, Handshake, it's got sick of that in 4 seconds.
Well, literally nauseous in 4 seconds of watching that.
Yep, there, totally. Cool. So getting to close down. Thank you very much for listening. Apologies for my complete discombobulation. You can find our website at Screentone.club, where you'll find all of our previous episodes and a link to the document which indicates all the series we've reviewed so far. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, etc. If you like the podcast, please feel free to tell a friend or tweet about it or write a review. That stuff really helps and is greatly, greatly appreciated. You can find our Twitter at Screentone Club, and you can also email us to show@screentone.club. For myself, I'm Elliot Page. You can find me, well, not for much longer, at moash.it, which is a domain that's going to collapse once Brexit happens, because I won't be a European citizen. And you can find me on Twitter at Elliot Page, where I alternate once again between getting angry and posting cat pictures. How about you, Andy?
Yes, you can find me posting about an anime character called Stephanie Gorgeous Palace and much more at Hannah's 1979 on Twitter.
Isn't that Index again or something else?
Yes, Index has gone into the heavy object school of bad character names now.
What do you mean bad?
Well, bad in inverted commas. Bad, so bad it's good character names.
I think you mean perfect. I don't know. As long as they don't have like a character called like, I don't know, Hime Brexit Pants, that's fine.
That should have been the last story arc, but hey.
Jeez. Anyway, so thank you very much for listening. We will announce shortly, once I get off this call, what our bonus episode will be on. So Andy will also find out live as well. So thank you very much for listening, and good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.